Please excuse the delay. I welcome everybody to January Finance Committee meeting. As you can see, I'm not Lawrence S. Schwartz, but I'll do my best. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Florio if there are any members of the public who have registered to speak and are ready.
Well, it's Mr. Keller.
Mr. Keller, I'm sorry.
No problems. There are 4 public speakers this morning. Just as a reminder, speakers are limited to 2 minutes, and there's a clock up here for your convenience. The first speaker is Jason Pinero, followed by Omar Vera.
Are we having epic fails, or I don't know what's going on here? It's 2:08 in the afternoon on this finance committee. First of all, Freddie, since that our beloved Larry Schwartz isn't in because of unknown circumstances out of our control, I'm gonna say this, and I have said it thousands of times in the opportunities that I have spoken the finance committee. They should have a way, Bob Ferran, to allocate funds for a veterans discount. It is not fair of having people like H.P. Shorter coming up over here to this podium every month to make his case. It is time the MTA as a whole provide discounts not only to veterans, but to everybody as broad. And of course, cutting expenditures like spending money in upstate resorts. We don't want that in the Metropolitan Transportation Authority of the state of New York. And as a New Yorker myself, I'm demanding each and every county executive to allocate funds to fund the MTA, because the MTA is not dependent on the city itself. Every single county executive should put money in the bucket also. So let's see if we get the money, shall we? And I'll see you guys on Thursday on the vote on the fare and toll increases.
Thank you, Mr. Pinero. The second speaker is Omar Vera, followed by Murray Bowden.
Good afternoon, MTA Finance Committee. Happy New Year. Well, we got a lot to discuss this year. Well, especially this month. Starters, get the veterans discount because, as Jason mentioned, as I mentioned in the past, H.P. Shore has repeatedly come to this podium during meetings to ask to demand that veterans get a discount, but in the past, it's often to no avail. Hopefully, this time could be different. Second, I believe, the MTA, more money needs to be come to the MTA from the government sources. So no more funding these resorts that almost nobody uses, because that's a waste of cash. We need money here in the city because we're basically the lifeline to the rest of the state. Unfortunately, I have no offense to the upstaters, but a lot of them act very, very greedy. That's a no-no. It's true. It's true. They're extremely greedy. They need to put in their fair share because they should not be leeching out of us all the time. The people who work the best should get the best benefits, and that's us in the city. So, and like Jason recommended before, let's get the other county executives to support this new plan, especially Transit President Byford's Fast Forward, because that plan is amazing. And last but not least, I stressed this morning, I stressed in the past regarding fare and toll changes. This fare increase every 2 years is got to stop. It's no good. So either keep the fare the same or at least lower it to where it was before 2009. But in any case, I'll let you decide in good faith the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. The next speaker is Murray Bowden, to be followed by Lisa Daglian.
It's the Finance Committee. Finance Committee is about money. I watched the video of the special meeting. Actually, I watched it twice.
Freddie, you did a good job. You know what you're talking about. I watched what you said this morning. You know what you're talking about. I also saw what Susan said. I need more information because we buy railroad cars for the next 40 years, and she's buying married pair cars, which is exactly what the governor said not to do. Don't do it the same way you did it before. She doesn't understand that today you buy cars that are open. You buy train sets that are not married pair, and somehow you have to deal with that. The Long Island Railroad Committee report this morning was excellent. You could see it on the screen. You could hear it when the Metro North Committee man said, can we get the same for Metro North? They're doing it right. Except that Mitch isn't doing his part with the crossings. Problem is I'm forgetting what I'm supposed to say. Somehow you're going to have to deal with the... Polly Trottenberg had questions about the 7th Avenue and various issues. And her department is completely out of control. Signs and lines, as said, on a East Side Drive at 61st Street, North Exit, is completely marked wrong. It's costing millions of dollars in bad information to drivers, and nobody's been able to get that corrected. You got a job here on this committee. If you want to save money, tell the drivers the truth. Follow up on the way the governor said, use the latest technology, and you'll get there. Freddie, you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The final speaker is Lisa Daglian.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Daglian, the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. So I'll probably be really brief because I was under the impression that that there would be a conversation on the potential fare hike today at this committee meeting. And since it appears that is not the case, I will save my well-written testimony for Thursday. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This concludes the public speaking section.
Thank you all very much for coming and sharing with us. Next on the agenda is approval of the December 10th minutes. May I have a motion to approve? Second. Are there any changes, or if there's nothing, all in favor of approving minutes? Opposed? Abstaining? Minutes are approved. Could you please take us, David, through the work plan?
A draft of the 2019 Finance Committee work plan was provided in the December 2018 committee book. That work plan is included in this book on page 14 and would now need a motion to approve it.
Is there a motion? Second? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The work plan is approved. Thank you.
The next item is Budget Watch, which is a special 2018 year-end flash. The January Budget Watch can be found on page 2 of the exhibit book, and it's also on mta.info. The January Budget Watch is a first look at some 2018 results, specifically capturing preliminary results for revenues, subsidies, and debt service. At this point, 2018 operating expenses are either unavailable or too preliminary to be meaningful. Actual results discussed in this Budget Watch are compared to the November 2018 forecast captured in the November financial plan and approved by the board in December. Preliminary 2018 passenger revenues were favorable by $9.5 million, reflecting favorable variances of $13.2 million for subway, $2.8 million for New York City Transit bus, and $1.2 million for MTA bus. The Long Island Railroad was on target, and Metro North was unfavorable by $7.7 million, primarily due to lower non-commutation ridership and lower commutation passenger yield. B&T toll revenue ended the year $9 million favorable, reflecting higher than projected traffic over the last quarter of the year, primarily stemming from favorable weather. 2018 debt service of $2.54 billion was $18.6 million, or 0.7% favorable, reflecting timing and savings from lower than budgeted variable rates. Moving on to subsidies. State dedicated taxes and fees were $55.7 million unfavorable for the year. PMT payroll mobility tax collections were $27.8 million unfavorable, and MTA aid was $30.4 million unfavorable. Of the MTA aid, about half seems to be delayed in motor vehicle fees, and the remainder is a shortfall in taxi cab and automobile rental fees, but we're still looking into those aspects. Real estate transaction taxes were $15.8 million favorable as a result of higher urban tax collections in the last quarter. Overall, when compared with the November forecast, total revenue was unfavorable by $21 million, reflecting unfavorable variances of $9.5 million in farebox revenue, $9 million favorable in toll revenue, and $15.8 million from real estate transaction receipts, and these were offset by $55 million from state dedicated taxes and fees. Debt service was $9 million favorable. Also, last week the governor released the 2019-2020 fiscal year executive budget. The MTA will receive more than $5.2 billion from all state sources, an increase of $287 million, or 5.8%, over the fiscal year 2019 enacted budget. Some highlights: MMTOA increases by $137 million, PBT increases by $12 million, increases in payroll mobility tax of $69 million, increase in MTA aid of $4 million, increase in subway action plan funding of $21 million, and an increase in the general New York City transit funding of $41 million. The last two items, the general transit funding and the subway action plan, are generated from the for-hire vehicle fee, and the SAP component replaces the one-time funding the state, along with matching funds from the city, provided the MTA to jumpstart that repair and maintenance program. The net result of these changes in revenue is a favorable $38 million improvement compared with the November financial plan. And that concludes Budget Watch, if there are any questions.
Are there any questions? For the sake of clarity, John,
Sure.
the impact of the lawsuit on the for-hire vehicles charge?
We're estimating approximately, this is an average daily of $1.1 million per day. Total for a month would be about $33 million.
Okay. There's nothing else. We're ready for
Right.
Mr.
So next we have Finance Watch, which can be found on page 4 and section 4, page 22, and Pat McCoy is here to take us through it.
As you can see here,
Mr. Merdler has a question. Mr. Merdler.
When the case was adjourned, was there a temporary restraining order in effect?
Yeah, there is a temporary restraining order
And
currently in
is
effect.
there a bond? Did the court order a bond to be posted in support
Mr.
of-
Quigley will.
Have you applied for one?
We're not a party to the lawsuit. FTA is not a party to the lawsuit. It's only the city, state, and the taxi company.
No, we're just a victim. It's a partyless crime. Can we proceed?
okay, Finance Watch appears on your book. The only thing, I won't go through all this. The one thing I do want to add as an item that we've added since this was printed, and that's the fact that you see here we have a $500 million transportation revenue green bond issue 2019A, which we intend to price in the market on January 31st. Similarly, that same day, we're going to issue $750 million of bond anticipation notes under the transportation revenue credit, and that's to fund existing approved capital projects. So you'll see some emails coming from me with those documents, the disclosure documents, as well as the rating reports, and then I'll report next month on the results.
There are two reports and information items for HQ that are included in the exhibit book and MTA.info. The first is a special report, Finance Department's 2018 year-end review, and here to present it is Pat McCoy, Director of Finance.
Okay. I'm just going to go through a couple slides quickly here in the interest of time. First, this report, which is a leave behind in your materials, summarizes our outstanding portfolio of debt, currently $38.8 billion. And you see here how the debt is dispersed across our active credits, and then by the type of debt we issue, which of course is still predominantly a fixed rate issue. Let me just go on to the next one here. This slide shows you all of our existing debt as well as forecasted new debt to be issued. And as you can see, in the current year, we're estimating debt service of just slightly over $2.750 billion. increasing to where we get slightly over $3.5 billion after 2023. Quick summary of our 2018 transactions, totaling $6.6 billion. As you can see here, it included new money, bonds to issue to retire bans. We did some modest refundings. You know, our advance refunding was eliminated, so there wasn't a lot of refunding we could do. And then, of course, our active work in 2018 was a significant number of remarketing transactions, which were all placed successfully in the market. And then lastly, I just want to point out our rating picture here. This is on page 10 of the book. As you can see here in the narrative up above, last year Standard & Poor's downgraded the transportation revenue credit on 2 occasions, in March and again in August. Our current rating there is A, flat, with a negative outlook. And then in December, Moody's acted to put the transportation revenue bonds on a negative outlook. So we're going back to the rating agencies seeking new ratings for those transactions that I just mentioned, and you'll get those reports as soon as I have them, but I just wanted to make sure you have our rating picture here.
So, yeah. So if we factored in the potential, no matter how far-fetched, that the legislature does not pass congestion pricing and its impact potentially on our bond ratings?
I think if the legislature were to not pass the congestion pricing, we would be effectively back at the drawing board trying to figure out what our next steps would be, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Pat, from what you just said about the 2 agencies downgrading the rating on those bonds, what does that do to our interest rate?
It causes our interest rate to increase.
Obviously.
And what we saw in the last part of 2018 was widening spreads. And by spread, I'm talking about the additional incremental interest that we pay based on credit issues. And over October, November, and December, we saw our spreads widen. Now, to be fair, a lot of our peer issuers also saw their spreads widen. However, compared to other New York issuers, we saw our spreads widen a little bit more. We believe that is principally due to pressure on the credit, as we've discussed previously.
How often do the agencies look at changing our ratings? How often are ratings adjudged?
Well, every time we go into the market to issue bonds, we're asking for a new rating. And typically that means they pull a committee together and evaluate the credit and then issue a rating. Oftentimes it's no change, but as we saw last year, we had a fair amount of activity, particularly from S&P.
Thanks.
Pat, just for my clarification, did you say that MTA was asking the credit agencies to review the ratings that it had provided? You were initiated that step with the credit agencies.
Well, when we issue bonds, we issue the bonds with the ratings, and the only way we can do that is to seek a new rating for the new issue of bonds. And so that triggers at the rating agency a committee that gathers together, and there's typically a lead analyst that we work very closely with. Marcia here behind me works very closely and is in communication with the rating agencies almost on a daily basis. They'll often send over a list of 20 or 30 questions that they want us to be prepared to address, and we'll have all the right people in the meeting to make sure that we are completely disclosed to them and answer their questions as fully as we can. So this is an ongoing relationship with a lot of touch points. Again, it's almost on a daily basis. But the trigger of a rating really typically comes with the request of a rating on a new issue of securities.
Mr. Chair, it may be valuable for this committee, because I feel like Ms. Vanderpool's question has come up a couple of times. It may be valuable to have Pat share the rating agency presentation you give at some point to this committee, because I think, well, again, I don't know, I wouldn't speak for everyone's professional background, but having seen an S&P or a Fitch ratings presentation is something not everyone, I suspect, has been involved in. And so why don't you, maybe you walk them through a facsimile of what that conversation looks like.
I'd be happy to do that, no problem. Yeah, okay, yeah. So that there's obviously more in the report. It's behind, and I'd be happy to take your questions at any time on that after you've gone through the material.
Is there anything further? Okay.
Okay, so next we have a draft of the Independent Auditor's Review Report of MTA Consolidated Interim Financial Statements as of and for 9-month period ending September 30th, 2018. It will be presented and voted on later today at the Audit Committee meeting.
Okay.
Next is David Ross with procurements for headquarters and the agencies.
Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For headquarters, there are 3 procurement actions totaling $11,533,753. There are 2 non-competitive actions totaling about $11.1 million. The first is a $1.8 million sole source contract with Railware Incorporated to maintain and support its proprietary Dispatch X software for a period of 68 months. Software is used by Long Island Railroad to monitor and control its interlockings, and Metro North is near finishing its implementation for centralized traffic control and related subsystems. The second action is a $9.4 million change order with Cubic Transportation Systems Incorporated to extend support for New York City Transit's bus customer information system for 18 months. During that time, New York City Transit's Department of Buses plans to assemble an in-house service group to take over that responsibility. I'll also note that of that $9.4 million, about half is for new equipment required because Verizon will no longer support 3G in 2020. Finally, headquarters has 1 competitive action for $400,000 to provide consultant staffing that supports the administration of MTA's Music Under New York program for 3 years.
May I have a motion first? Are there any questions or comments on these? If there are none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
Okay. There are no items for Metro North. Long Island Railroad is proposing the award of a non-competitive contract to Conservation Station Incorporated for $300,000 to redesign the LED signal that is used throughout Long Island Railroad's infrastructure. Long Island Railroad needs to resize and redesign the signal to accommodate reduced spacing allowances between tracks, primarily on the recently completed mainline second track.
I'm sorry. You want me to do that again?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about the mic. Are there any questions on this? We had a motion and a second on this procurement. No questions? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurement carries. Thank you. Now, Mr. Ross, New York City Transit has some procurements?
They do. New York City Transit has 5 procurement actions totaling $266,690,385. The first action is a $27.3 million non-competitive purchase of 15 low-floor, 60-foot articulated all-electric buses and related charging equipment from New Flyer of America. New Flyer was identified as the only manufacturer that has a 60-foot AEB that is structurally qualified in the New York City Transit duty cycle. Next is a request for omnibus approval for an estimated $10.7 million to purchase various signal and switch system items for New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. The covered items are available from the qualified products list of Alstom Signaling Operation, LLC. Next is a $210 million competitive award to 3 vendors for broker car service for the Department of Buses Paratransit Division. Curb Mobility, LLC will be awarded 60% of all boroughs except Staten Island. Corporate Transportation Group will receive the other 40% in all boroughs except Staten Island. And Bell Linda Incorporated will be awarded Staten Island. The 4th New York City Transit action provides $18.4 million for a 12-month extension of a contract with PTM Management Corp. to continue providing accessoride services for the Department of Buses Paratransit Division. This extension will afford New York City Transit time to solicit a dedicated primary accessoride carrier. Lastly, for New York City Transit, there's a proposed authorizing resolution to declare competitive bidding impractical or inappropriate for the procurement of 275 low-floor 40-foot hybrid buses. An RFP process is proposed instead. That's it for New York City Transit.
Any questions or comments on this package? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Procurement's carried. Next is bridges and tunnels, Mr. Ross.
There are no items for bridges and tunnels, and there are no items for FEMTAC. This concludes the procurements. Now to David Keller.
The MTA consolidated financial and operational reports are on pages 58 to 115. Next is David Florio with real estate.
Thank you, David. There are 3 action items in this month's committee. I'll present the first 2. The first is a lease agreement at 3 locations across 2 stations for retail at the 51st Street and 86th Street stations. There's a typo on the agenda that was noted by Commissioner Alpert. Thank you very much. That'll be corrected for the board. The second item is a license agreement short-term with Pace University for use of 12,000 square feet of retail currently in the Battery Garage.
Why don't you describe the item and I'll just put it in context.
The third item is this proposed sale of air rights from the on the West Side Yard to Related pursuant to the opportunity to sell them from the zoning resolution.
And I just wanted to be here just to highlight, so since we're in talking about finances a lot, we are continuing to maximize the opportunities to sell air rights. In this case, these are excess air rights that were not used on the original site. Bob has, in effect, struck a deal that will allow us, it's not clear how much will be purchased, but they'll be at a $275 per square foot rate, which is all based on appraisals and so on. But assuming this goes through, this will bring us close to $1.7 billion in air rights income from the Hudson Yards site and development. So we're maximizing that. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but this is a transaction that you put in motion some years ago that continues to yield very significant returns to the body.
Mr. Chairman, recuse for cause.
Okay. Anyone else? Not recusing, but any other question? If there is none, are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? This procurement carries. These items carry. Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one question?
Yes,
or
sir.
not a question, not on these, but could the real estate department provide me, and I assume everybody else, with whatever materials we have about parking rates that we charge on our facilities and parking rates that we allow municipalities to charge on their facilities? It is becoming a major issue on Long Island. The differences between one municipality and another municipality, which obviously leads to somebody being favored over somebody else, which I think I would prefer not to have happen. But until I have an analysis of what we actually allow people to do, it's hard to say who's got what. So that would be very much appreciated.
Sure, we can provide that rate chart for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just by point of clarification, since it's sometimes misunderstood, we own like 12% of the spaces on Long Island.
Yes.
So everybody assumes, and understandably, that it's all the Long Island Railroad setting the
Right.
rates and running the parking lots. It's just not the case. And we will provide the information you've requested, but I know as this discussion goes on the island, we have to make sure people understand it's mostly not in our control.
Right, but we...
And to characterize it as we allow them to do it really is not right.
Well, in some cases, I mean, there are situations where we have allowed municipalities to charge for facilities that are ours.
We have leased
Right,
lots.
as opposed to theirs.
Leased lots that they then set
Right.
the rates for,
Right.
subject to some terms. So,
Right.
but we'll answer it for the committee and give you the information we have.
Thank you.
And can we do that also for Metro North territory?
You bet.
Yes.
You bet.
Might as well,
Because the issue should be uniform in some context here, and parking is becoming, the great thing is, on the Long Island Railroad, we're going to have 90 million people on the train next year. The bad thing is they can't find a parking spot, okay? After 7:30 at Ronkonkoma, you can't find a spot. And I know that is the case in many other of the smaller lots. And then in many of the other smaller lots, we run into the residency permit issue, which is related to the cost issue. And in my perspective is even more important because, in those cases where we have funds, nobody should be deprived of a spot nor charged a higher rate because they don't live in that municipality. That may be my position. I know it's not everybody's position. It's my position. But having said that, all of these issues are interrelated to each other, especially in places where you can't build additional parking because nobody wants a parking garage unless you happen to be at Ronkonkoma or Hicksville or Mineola. So the issue is even going to become more important, not less, and I'm sure my compatriots in the Metro North area feel the same way. So I think a new understanding and analysis by this board of the parking issues that relate would be very helpful.
And if I just may, we are doing a fair amount on that, but important issue to be borne in mind is that we have to, all of us together with the localities, focus on the so-called last mile connections. And the Suffolk County executive, to his credit, and I think the Nassau County executive as well, really are doing some piloting, and they're moving towards testing different approaches. If for Long Island to continue to grow, it will have to. We do not have an unlimited amount of space for parking lots, and we're going to have to figure out ways for people, whether it's ride sharing or bikes or otherwise, to be able to access the stations without just building unlimited amounts of parking.
Mr. Albert.
Some of the issues that Mitch is referring to, like the difficulty in finding parking at Ronkonkoma, is because of the service-related issues. That's an electric line. It's got frequent service. The parallel diesel lines do not. And so people are driving miles out of their way to go to the Ronkonkoma branch. Right. So the sooner we outfit the other lines, which we are looking at, I understand, with electrification, and the more frequent the service.
Well, that'll be the board's choice if we choose to address the parking problems by electrifying lines.
No, it's just another way of...
Significant investment.
Yes,
but,
indeed.
Okay.
Fred?
Dr. Metzger, Mr. Brown.
Sorry. I just want to be sure that you reach out to the two railroads because I think they have information about which lots are full, and that would be useful for the board. I'm pretty familiar with what's full for the Metro North area, but I'm not for Long Island. I assume just about everything. And whether there are any strange or any requirements, such as residency for each of the lots that does exist. So we have a better understanding of how difficult it is for a rider to get on our trains.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I encourage you to drink deep. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing when it comes to this stuff, especially to parking. The parking is the chief cap on capacity utilization on the commuter rails, correctly identified here. And while I share Mitch's sort of Pollyannish desire to have a single policy that would fit all jurisdictions, one thing that characterizes these jurisdictions is, first of all, there's 7,000 of them, and they all have their own ideas in what development is, and Long Island has scuttled several what to me looked entirely reasonable multifamily dwellings near railroad properties, where you just you shake your head and say, how could these people oppose these buildings? So all this has to be sort of layered together, and it's hard to put together a policy that would achieve greater access for our riders, when you have to wade through the morass of NIMBYs and little old ladies and little old men at board meetings that vote against absolutely every development you do. And then you have the garage development issues versus just a parking lot where people drop their car by the side of the road. And where most of the people are happy to find a place to just drop their car beside the road, but look at the sort of investment it takes to put together a parking garage. And you know, one thing I've always wanted to get out of you every time you bring a parking garage or parking improvement to the board is how much it costs for each parking space at those garages. And this all has to be rolled into our concept of service planning. And yeah, you would even it out if everywhere was electrified, but as Jano pointed out, it'd be very expensive. Thank you for your tolerance.
Thank you for drinking deep. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Real estate action items carry. There are information items. Mr. Florio, do you want to go through them or refer to them?
I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have, the community may have.
If not, we're at the end. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. CPAC next.